Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show inspiring men to be mindful about their lives. Each week, we'll dive into a range of topics that matter to men and hear from everyday people doing extraordinary things. So if you love the show, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your mates. Now, before we get into this week's episode, please note that some of the content may trigger you. And if this happens, please reach out to your support networks. It's really important. If you can't get enough of Mindful Men, head over to our website. It's www.mindful-men.com.au. Find the show notes and the links to our socials there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rinnie, and today we're getting mindful about stress and burnout, and in particular, how breathwork can help us to regain calm again. And helping me with this discussion, I've got Thomas Beresford from Sydney, New South Wales. How are you going, Thomas?
Fantastic, yes. You?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited that you're here and talking about burnout because it's something I have touched on in the Mindful Men podcast in previous episodes. I've experienced it and I've talked to April Likens about her experience of burnout too. So I'm interested to hear another bloke's perspective on burnout as well and what it was like in your life. How did you come across it? What did you do to get through that? But to introduce you to my audience, you're a recovering chartered accountant, and I love that phrase, recovering chartered accountant. You're a husband and father, and you've got your own business where it helps people to beat stress. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
I am looking forward to this. And anyone who knows me knows I love a good dad chat first. And so you said you're a husband and father. So tell me, how many kids have you got? How old are they? What genders are they?
So we have a girl. She's now 2 and 3 months old. Her name is Maya. She was born here in Sydney. So she's like I said, she's a COVID baby.
A COVID baby. Tell us what it was like to have a COVID baby.
Interesting. It really was. And the thing when I've spoken to people about this before is life here in Australia for us was very much in screens anyway. We were quite used to that. We don't have any family here. We only came in 2019. So we got here in 2019, just before the fires. Then the fires started. Then the fires kind of went away, and then COVID hit. So we had an interesting start. And yeah, our experience here, we didn't have that same impact that other people felt here, being cut off from family and not being able to go and see people, because we didn't have a lot of that anyway. But it was interesting having the baby because it actually gave us something to focus on. And, and at that age, she's quite young. But it was good here in Sydney. We could still get out, take her for walks. Which was really important. And some other places in the world kind of lost it a little bit and stopped people even going outside. So we had that. So it was interesting, but it didn't really hit us as hard as I think it hit other people.
Yeah, I remember COVID and being in the lockdowns, and my wife, she'd taken off, she'd had a baby in the December prior. So my daughter Pippa was born in December 2019. And so my wife had all these plans for a year off, and they're going to do all these mummy-daughter things, and none of that ever happened. And she's often said to me that she feels like she missed that year with our daughter because she was still here. We're all here. And in fact, my little boy was here and I was here, and, everyone was in the same four walls of the house. But yeah, she felt like she missed out because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I love also talking about dads and in terms of what it means to be a dad. So yeah, tell us in your words, what does it mean to be a father?
Well, everything is the only word that comes to mind when you ask me that. When I met my now wife, 2015 in Cyprus, we went out for the first time. We call it a non-date because she wasn't happy to commit to a date. So we had a non-date, glass of wine. And one of the first things I told her, we were talking about what we were hoping for, what we were wanting. And I was telling her at the time, I was feeling like I was running down and wanting to step back because I wanted to be a dad. And I'd always wanted to be a dad. And I've kind of always felt that inside. And I've always said I didn't want to be an old dad. And the universe laughed at me and made me wait. So, so it's everything. And you're always told that the meaning of life changes and it flips the second you have kids. I think that's an experience for most people. And until you go through it, you don't realize what people mean. But yeah, and then the center of your universe changes from whatever it was before to then.
How would you compare yourself before being a dad to after being a dad? What's changed about you fundamentally?
It's interesting because I think, you all of a sudden become much more aware of the fragility of life, and you just see danger everywhere. You know, the corner of the table, the chair that might slide and topple over, the car that might veer off the road and bounce up the curb and come over. Everything. You just see it everywhere. And I think we're always aware of it. We don't really give it that much attention. We just kind of walk through life. But yeah, just becoming so much more aware of what could impact this little life of yours. And you're just, protective is a word. I'm not sure it's the right word in the moment, but it's just that they are completely dependent on you because they've got no idea about anything that's dangerous. And so, you know, you are there for them. And that's what comes to mind when you ask. It's a good question.
In the parent circles that I'm with, we always laugh as well. It's like before kids, we thought we were tired and we'd all have these afternoon nana naps in a Saturday afternoon or whatever. And now we barely like keeping a couple of hours of sleep together, but we're still functioning as well. And we just know a different type of tired since becoming parents.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a different kind of tired. And I think something else is you kind of always know that you're capable of more, but you suddenly realize that although multitasking isn't a thing, you're certainly capable of doing a lot more things in such a short space of time because that time on your own is so precious and you just get so much. And even if it's a really concerted effort to just sit and do nothing, like you really savor it and make the most of it. And it's like, I'm just going to sit and enjoy this for a bit. Whatever it is, you just make it mean so much more.
I had that kind of experience last weekend, and we're talking off air about this. Like I attended a men's retreat, and it was a 12-hour retreat or 14 hours in total, just on a one-dayer. But I purposely enjoyed like not wearing my watch, for example, and not having my phone on me, and for a whole day. So my wife could never have got to me if she needed to talk to me. But it was so nice to have that moment away from family life, or away from my small business, and just for me to enjoy those moments of quiet. Or we did a bit of breath work on the day as well, and we'll talk about breath work in this episode, and just be.
Yeah. Almost what life used to be like, right? Before, I mean, I'm still young enough to remember what it was like without cell phones, mobile phones. And that's what life used to be like. You'd just leave the house and then you'd come home when you came home, right? And you'd just be happy not to hear from people for 6 hours, 8 hours. Oh, they've gone away for the weekend. I'll see them in 2 days. Like, you'd just be so happy that was just what it was. I don't know how my parents did it. Like, we would just leave the house in the morning and then come home at nighttime. And I know what I was up to. They have no idea what I was up to, thank goodness. But, you know, you were just happy. That's just what it was. And now, can you imagine letting your kids go outside and not hearing from them for like 2 hours? Even 2 hours, like you'd be freaking out.
That reminded me of my youth, and we'd go out pretty much when dawn would come up, and then we would stay out or be in and out all day with my brothers and our friends, and come back when it's dark or the lights are on, or when dad's yelling in the street, boys, come home.
yeah, exactly. Like you'd be hear your name called from like, my mates used to tease me because my mum's got a strong Scottish accent, and they'd always like, you know, she'd be shouting at the top of her voice, Thomas and Angela, you know, to come home. And you think back to some of the things you used to do. Like, to you, it was just fun, you know, these really high swings on trees or these big jumps. And I think if you saw your kids doing it now, you'd be like, yeah.
And this is a really good topic that we're talking about, because it kind of reminds us of our youthful days when things like stress didn't really exist for us. But now, maybe as we're become adults, or even you see it in teens as well these days as well, we get stressed. We become parents, we get stressed. We maybe have a corporate job or a trade, or maybe we're unemployed, we're stressed. There's a lot of stress. Even our TVs are 24/7 these days, and our phones are 24/7. I remember the days when the TV would turn off at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night. It'll just be like that white fuzz that's on the screen. And so stress is constant in our lives. And I'm keen to hear your thoughts about how it's shown up for you, and how it's impacted you in your careers and in your personal life as well.
Well, I'll kind of walk you through some of the stories I tell on my workshops. And so I often start by telling people that I'm walking around the office and no one knows what I've got under my shirt. And every now and then I'm pressing this button, and it's 2010 and it's KPMG. I'm in the final year of my exams. And the doctors told me to press this button every time I get this sensation in my chest, because I'd been to him with this complaint. So I go back a few weeks later for the results, and he says to me, Thomas, are you sure you pressed the button every time you noticed? I said, well, I was working, so I probably missed a few because I actually had work to do and I wasn't noticing it all the time. And he said, oh, I thought you might have pressed it too often. I was like, no. And he said, well, you've got an ectopic heartbeat. To which I said, a what? Now, I had a sports science degree. I used to teach sports science and things like that. And I didn't know what it was. And ectopic just means out of place. And it was an ectopic heartbeat. And so my heart developed this arrhythmia. I said, what's caused that? I'm quite young. And he said, stress. And my answer, the typical answer to someone in a corporate world, I'm not stressed. Well, Thomas, your body is telling you that you are. And so we're not aware of it. And I'd had the first warning 3 years earlier. So 3 years earlier, I'd changed career. I was a high school teacher, sports science, physical education, and I became a chartered accountant. And within 3 months of changing career, I put on 25 kilos in weight. I was only 70 kilos, so it was really noticeable. That was the first nudge from the universe to say, hey, there's something not right. Your body is telling you that whatever you're doing now isn't really healthy. That was the first nudge. The second nudge was the ectopic heartbeat. And then over the course of over however many years, there's all these different things I could tell you about slowly losing touch with myself and not quite being myself. And we can talk about what that means in terms of burnout. And then 2018, I'm sat in a doctor's office and he tells me, Thomas, if you want to have kids, you need IVF. And that was the train to the face, because I told you I always wanted to be a dad and I knew that. And I was like, what? And when someone tells you something and you feel it inside, they're telling the truth. Like, yeah, I get it. I don't want to know that, but actually you're right. Well, this one was no. There was something inside me that was screaming no. And it could have been the Taurus in me. It could have been the older brother in me. It could have been anything, but there was something screaming like, no, you're wrong. Because I knew all this stuff, right? I'd been drinking bulletproof coffee since 2011, 7 years. I was intermittent fasting and I was doing all this stuff, but I just knew that I had a lot of knowledge, but it wasn't really wisdom. I wasn't doing it. And so in that year, a couple of things happened. I got that news. I watched Joe Rogan's podcast with Matthew Walker on Why We Sleep, bought the book whilst I was listening to the podcast. It arrived from Amazon the next day. I read it in 3 days. And that book took sleep from being the thing I did at the end of the day because I was exhausted and I had to get to bed because I had to get up for work the next day. And the thing I did, I closed my laptop and go to bed, right? Even though I knew about how important sleep was, I wasn't doing it. But it took it from there to the thing that everything revolved around. It took it to number one on the priority list. The thing I tell people about stress is you're not going to escape it. You just can't. It's not the fact that you're going to be exposed to things that stress you. It's how often do you experience it? How long does it last for? And how do you let go of it? That's the thing that you need. That's the skill of life to learn. And we can talk about a little bit about that. You mentioned a men's retreat, and I can tell you about my experience on that as well and how that changed everything.
What did you do before the men's retreat? Like, how did you let it go? Or didn't you?
No, I mean, I went to the gym. I would exercise and stuff, and you'd go out and I was, going on dates and trying to meet someone. And it's not that kind of stress, right? It's the stress that you're constantly just always busy. You're always activated somehow. And a lot of, for us in that field, it's a lot of the knowledge work. It's a lot of the intellectual work you're doing. Or for me, the job I was in at the time, I was based in Rotterdam, but I was traveling to Switzerland. I was traveling to Cyprus. I was traveling to Malta. I was traveling to the Isle of Man. And it all sounds really glamorous, but it's not, because you don't travel on company time. You travel on your own time. So you travel in the evenings. You're traveling on weekends, eating, you're sleeping in hotels. The food's not great. And again, it's just this slow, steady drip of things that just keep constantly dripping and chipping away at the things that your body needs. And it's just this slow drain on the body.
You touched on a few little symptomologies around, well, actually, before I'm not going to repeat it, I want to hear it from your mouth. Like, what were the symptoms that were showing up? How were you presenting at work? How were you presenting in your social life? Were you happy, sad? Talk us through the symptomology that you experienced.
I think for me, so there's always, and for everyone it's different, right? But when you are on the path to burnout, and the way I explain burnout to people is I use this really old concept, right? Of this concept of the river. So a river starts in the mountain as a really small stream. And then it makes its way down and it joins up with other streams and it gets wider and wider and deeper and deeper and wider. And eventually it becomes this huge raging body of water. And at any point you can cross that river, but at the source, it's really easy to cross it. And if you want to cross it, it's at the mouth of the river, you need help. It takes some time. And that's what burnout is. Burnout is eventually the stresses in your life build up and build up and build up. And they become this, you just get swept away by it. And different people get swept away and it affects at least one area of these different accounts in your life. The area of my life that suffered the most was my friendships. So I had time. I was still going to the gym. I was still working and putting most of my effort into the work that I had to do. I would still speak to my family. We're quite close. But it was the friendships and I was still trying to go out on dates, but like the time with friends, replying to messages, helping people that needed me, that was the area that suffered, that. And if you think about, someone says like, what kind of a person are you? Burnout impacts that and you lose touch with what you would call yourself. You're normally compassionate and you're not. You just don't have the energy. It's not that you don't want to be, you're just like, oh, I can't. You don't even deal with it, right? You can't deal with it right now. And I think a lot of people, it's friendships that suffer, certainly for me. It wasn't really obvious in work, although I started to get to the point in work where I was looking at the work and I was like, it's just meaningless. This point, what am I doing? And so then I started to lose touch with caring about the work that I was doing, and then the social interactions in work, like helping people with their problems and doing projects is fine. But some of the work, I was just like, then you stop caring about that. And that's a slippery slope. And so those two big areas started to really suffer. But even still, like it wasn't drastic, but it was noticed, but it wasn't drastic. But it was the news from the doctor. It was the internal world telling me I needed IVF. It wasn't outwardly obvious. Even though 2010, I'd had the ectopic heartbeat. In 2007, I put on the weight. It wasn't until I got that news from the doctor that I needed IVF. And then to cut a long story short, I changed a lot of stuff and we'll talk about what I did. But we have the daughter and I didn't need IVF. And I'm not saying that's possible for everybody, but there are certain, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. There's so much that you can do, that there's so much control that you can take back. And once you get that fixed, maybe, just maybe you're lucky like me and that's all it needed. You didn't need the outward help. Some people still will.
Yeah.
But sometimes we go to outward help and actually, if you could just take a step back and spend a bit of time and invest in yourself, there's some things that you can do that might take some time. You're at the mouth of the river. You need some time. You've been swept away and it's going to take some effort. But if you can do that, if you can catch it and spend that time, then just maybe there's a chance that you can deal with a lot of it yourself. And one of the phrases I learned on this workshop, this men's retreat, was you have to do the work yourself, but you don't have to do it alone. And so you find things that, yes, there are people that can help me, but I've got to do the work too.
I like this river analogy that you've got, because when I first heard the word burnout, or I was talking to someone about burnout, they said it was specific to the workplace.
Yeah.
And so when I think of that river analogy, I look at it as multiple little streams of water coming in to make a big one. And so, yes, mine showed up in 2020 at the workplace. I was actually on a call to my manager when it all just blurted out and enough was enough. That was the straw that broke my back. But when I think about burnout and how I got to that point, work was one of the things. I worked in a high demand, high stressful job, but I also had my 30 years lived experience of mental illness that I was trying to work through. It was COVID as well, so we were locked down here in Australia. I was studying a master's degree at the time. We had 2 kids under 3, and I thought, actually, it is a lot to do with work, but it's also a lot to do with all these other little streams that are coming into my river as well. What was the straw that broke your back where you go, you know what? And you start saying the words, I'm burnt out?
Yeah, for me, it was the news from the doctor. So it was that external validation. And I think the common thing you'll hear from a lot of people who've been through it is, for the first time, you don't know you're burning out until someone points it out to you. Because it's such a unique experience for people. Like at the time when I got the ectopic heartbeat, the doctor said I was stressed. And people were like, why are you stressed? I was like, well, I was doing my chartered accountancy, but lots of people go through that. But it was my second career and I had a home and a mortgage and I had my family, and I was, the elder. But each thing on its own doesn't sound that big, but you just take on so much. You're carrying so much responsibility, and you take it all on your shoulders. And I can't speak for women because I'm not a woman, but what I can say is men, we are really bloody good at just taking it all on and pushing it down. And it comes out in one way or another. And often with men, it's a heart attack. You drop down, you fall over. For me, it was my heart gave me it wasn't too serious. They were thinking about beta blockers, but I was too young, and they said, we don't want to put you on them yet. And then it was the news from the doctor. And that's where it often in men will show up. They're your first early warning signs. There's some red flags that, you start getting these little nudges from the universe. And if you don't listen, one day it hits you with a big stick or a freight train to the face, like I call it.
And so what happened then? You got that news. What did the next few months look like for you?
For me, it was, it was a big step back. And what do I need to do? And there was a few things that happened in 2018. So like I said, I had the news, I read Matthew Walker's book. And so then the first thing I started to do was fix my sleep hygiene, like set up healthy boundaries around my sleep and the non-negotiables, and fix that. Because if you don't fix your sleep, you might as well not truly bother too much about exercising. Even the food that you eat can be problematic if you're not sleeping properly. Or if you eat at the wrong time, if you eat too close to bed, it can have certain impact. So there's all this stuff that I fixed around sleep. And then I spent time fixing my nutrition. So a guy called Dave Asprey, he's the guy who came out with Bulletproof Coffee. He's also got a book with his wife called The Better Baby Book. And I'd already read it because we were thinking about having kids, right? And in the back of the book, there's a specific section. He talks about what to do for sperm count, like what supplements to take, what to look at in your diet. And because I already knew about the bulletproof diet, but there was other things that you can do. So I spent some time and a lot of money. Just when I say a lot of money, we're not talking exorbitant amounts, but supplements are expensive, right? So got good quality supplements, fixed my sleep, fixed my nutrition, exercised wisely. And I then went to this new masculinity retreat in London. So it was run by a guy called David Fuller. He used to work for Channel 4 News. He had this company called Rebel Wisdom. He was one of the very first people to pick up on this new wave of intellectual like these public intellectuals that were out there. He interviewed quite a lot of them. And he ran a new masculinity retreat. And I was watching this video testimonial on YouTube, and I sent it to my wife and said, what do you think? She said, go. Because she knew I was on a self-development thing as well, right? And I went to that, and that's where I discovered breathwork. And what I realized about breathwork was, so there was 26, I don't know what your experience was, but there was 26 of us. And it was the Saturday afternoon. So we met on the Friday evening, Saturday afternoon. So it was less than 24 hours. We were all strangers. And all we did was 45 minutes to a nice tribal beat, and you were doing it, and there was someone sat beside you. And the only way I can describe it is we created a space, a safe space, to use common, modern terminology. We created a safe space for a group of men, and we gave them permission to let go. There was men in that room, and the one I always tell in my workshops, the story that there was a guy in there. He said, "My God," he said, "my dad died when I was a baby. I can't remember him, but I saw his face. I saw him." And I get goosebumps every time I tell the story. But there was guys there they'd broken up, they'd let go of some emotion, they'd had this powerful release, whether it was joy, sadness, grief, whatever it was. Different experience for everybody. And even for some guys who didn't have such a powerful experience, they still, at the end of it, they were just like, oh my God, I just feel so light for the first time in a long time. Their body was lighter, their minds were clear. And it was just a sense of relief as well as release. And so I realized that was a bit of a missing piece. It wasn't the answer, but it was something that was so simple, yet really powerful. And that set me off on a rabbit hole, because when I asked, what were we doing? It was a combination of holotropic breathwork and the Wim Hof breathwork. And that sent me down the rabbit hole then of, what is this? Why is it so powerful? How can I then get, because when I come across something that I think is powerful, I want to share it. And it was the most powerful thing that I had experienced at that point in my life. It was just something else.
I remember when I first did breath work, it was coming out of burnout, and I was looking for alternatives just to talking it out in therapy. I stumbled across this local one, and I thought I'd go and check it out. And I walked in, And there's some guy there with sage as I walk through the door, and I'm just like, oh, what am I walking into?
Yeah.
Some nice music, some nice incense that was burning, but I'm just like, this is nothing I've ever experienced. And it's a bit hippie, like it's a bit weird. It's
Yeah.
a bit different. And I remember sitting down, I sat myself in the back row. So there's about 20 people as well, and four. And I was in the back row. And as soon as they said, oh, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to breathe in. We're going to breathe out. It's going to get loud. It could get messy. It could be happy. It could be sad. And I'm just like, okay, what's going on? And then they started. And I basically, okay, one, two, we did a bit of practice. But then when the actual thing happened, I went into flight mode. And I immediately wanted to get out of that room. I feel like the sensory overload of people breathing in unison, the loud music. But I didn't, I was close to picking it up and going, you know what, this is just not for me. But I sat there and I got through it. Didn't have much of a release that first time. I was just like, okay, well, that just wasn't going to work. But I said, I'm going to come back again and try it again. And this time I'm prepared the next time. And I had a little bit of a release. A few solo tears came down. I went into that, not so much sadness, maybe a little bit of sadness, but relief feeling when I did it. Since then, I've found a different breathwork guy that does breathwork here on the Sunshine Coast, and he's the one that does the retreat that I went to recently. And now it's one of the things I look forward to the most, because you go on a bit of a journey. It is about 45 minutes to an hour or whatever it is, and you see things and you might tighten up. My arms tighten up and my legs go really cold when I do it, even though like it's 25, 30 degrees here at the moment. And I cry every time. I now cry every time. But when I wake up, I'm not sad. I just feel relief again. And I feel lighter and happier and more content. And that lasts for a couple of days for me now, which is fantastic, because historically I've relied on medication, booze, exercise, poor sleep, trying to get better sleep. That's been my go-to stuff. I'm interested on your very first time you did breath work. What was your response? Did you resist it or did you just fully embrace it? How did you go?
I'm quite a skeptical person. And like you, there were other people in the room, they were going for it. And I think for some people, they'd done it before and it was a bit contrived, a bit forced. And for me, I didn't really know what it was, like you. And so I just kind of, okay, I'll just go with it and I'll listen. But my brain was active a lot. But towards the end, when I really I just kept going and just kept trusting it and kept going with it and just, listen to the instruction and just kept going. And then it almost felt like it was the last 5 minutes. And I just had these really weird visions, and I can still see them now. And it was just so different. But the thing, even though I sat up and I knew that I had my skeptical mind had been running in the background still, I just felt so light and really connected to the people in the room, and not in some kind of weird way, but it was just like we'd all just done something that was so different. But no, there was no judgment. There was no no one was like, oh my God, he's crying. There was none of that, right? You didn't feel, there was no sense that you had to just pretend to be anything. You could just go with it and it was all fine. And I think that's what really landed with me. And that's what I try to encourage when I do it. I tell people your mind's going to race and you might be wondering why it's not working. And this isn't what I told. And this is not what people have had. And I don't wear the robes or the incense and stuff like that. So that's not, I'm a bit too skeptical for that side of it. And that's me, right? That's just how I do it. But what I do say to people is I'm going to make a commitment to you that you are going to feel, if you've never done this before, you're going to feel a way that you've not felt for either ever or a very long time. And it's just that feeling of lightness in the body and the mind. I always ask people like, what are you thinking? And they're like, nothing.
Nothing. That's it.
And I'm like, how's that? Weird. Exactly. Okay. And then you've opened the door then for what meditation can do for people. Because meditation for most people is too advanced. It's too difficult, right? Sit that still and clear your mind, or whatever you've been told to do, focus on the breath for 20 minutes. And whilst and then you've got a bit of work to do to reintegrate them back into the day. If they've got a clear mind, you can just send them off into the street, right? But yeah, that's the power of it for me. But yeah, my first experience was like similar to yours, a bit skeptical. I didn't have anything too trippy happen to me, but I still have the visions, and it was that overwhelming sense of just lightness and just, it was just,
for the skeptics that are listening, and we've used words like visions and trippy and all that type of stuff. This is just with our breathing.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Yeah. And, and I talk to people about the science of it, right? I tell them what's going on. I tell them, we're altering blood flow. The reason you get cold is you alter the blood flow. Your vessels will constrict. It will pull the blood into the middle. The blood flow to your brain is altered. It quiets down the rational part of your brain, which is why you will then have those emotional moments. You'll have those, even though you don't feel like you're having an emotional release as such, you'll have tears or whatever. It's because the rational part of your brain, which is constantly pushing it down, switching it off. Some people will tell you emotions are trapped in the body. I'm not so sure about that. There's not a lot of science out there to back that up. But what you are doing is you are getting a different part of the mind to kind of come to the forefront and just let it do what it wants to do. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience, and that's part of my challenge when I'm talking to people about my workshops is in the first session, because once you've had the first session, even when I don't do anything too powerful, do simple stuff with people, it's oh God, I feel great. That was only 10 minutes.
And it's as simple as laying on your back or even sitting down and connecting with your breath.
Yeah, exactly. And for some people, I was asked, like, how long do you think it would take you to have an impact on someone? And I said, give me 20 seconds, maybe. Give me 3 minutes, but give me 20 seconds. And I can show you how simple it is and how powerful it is. And that's all it is, right? So one of the things I always say to people is I'll say, okay, how do you know you're breathing right now? And they'll go, so how do you know you're breathing right now? How do you know? And they go, no, what do you notice? Do you feel movement, pressure, airflow? What is it? And they'll tell me something. I'll say, cool. I think that took about 15 seconds. I'll say, but I'll tell you what you weren't doing. You weren't time traveling. You weren't thinking about the future. You weren't thinking about the past. You weren't thinking about reports. You weren't thinking about deadlines. You weren't thinking about anything else. You were right here, right now, right there, tuned into your body, and everything was just okay. Your breathing slowed down, your heart rate slowed down, and it took 20 seconds. And it is really simple, but we just don't tune into it enough.
And so you did the men's retreat, you discovered breath work. Where did it take you? Did you stay in your corporate job? At what point did you throw that away and go, you know what, I'm going to go headfirst into this breath work business? Yeah, no, it was, so it took me, so I wanted to go and find out more about the Wim Hof method. I was living in Rotterdam at the time and I knew he was Dutch, so I went off on a bit of a rabbit hole there. But I was in the corporate world, but I knew we were coming to Australia. So my wife works at the consulate here. She was in the process of training to do that, and we were coming in 2019. And so I'd said, once I get settled, find a job, stay in the finance world, I'll then probably do some kind of certification. And that's what I did when I first got here. First goal was to find a job, and then also get qualified, because certificates are important. People want qualifications. There's not a lot of it out there really in terms of breathwork. It's not like a medical degree or anything like that. There's just different schools and they have certification programs, but the Wim Hof method is the most recognized, I suppose, out there. So yeah, my goal was to do that, get some gravitas behind me, get some stuff. So I did my training here. COVID happened. Breathwork and COVID don't really go hand in hand that well. Heavy breathing and didn't really. So it all got paused for a while we figured out what to do. So eventually that happened. And yeah, you mentioned Wim Hof. Talk us through like what that is for people that aren't familiar with Wim Hof's work. Yes, I mean, there's a whole story there about Wim Hof, and depending on who you listen to, there's a whole lot of stories. But he effectively overcame a lot of mental health challenges himself. You know, his wife took her own life and left him with some kids, and he went off on this whole spiritual journey. But effectively what he's developed is a method, and his method has 3 components to it. So breathwork, or conscious breathing is what it's called, is one of the pillars of his method. The other method is cold exposure, conscious, deliberate cold exposure. And the other one is kind of mindset, commitment, how you approach things. And so he's developed this method that you then look at these different areas and focus on them. Yeah. And is that your preferred modality, or is there other modalities that you like to dabble in as well? That's a good question. And for me, it depends on who's in front of me and what I'm trying to achieve and how long I've got. You know, a good Wim Hof session, a good one can take maybe 15, 20 minutes to have a real powerful, you can do it sat down, but it's good to do it lying down.
if you've got people in front of you that are pregnant, if you've got people in front of you that have got maybe some panic disorder, if you've got people in front of you that are burning out already, it's probably not the best thing for them. So it is one of the core methods that I use, but there's others out there. There's lots of different breathing skills, tools. So there's things like coherent breathing, which is the rhythm of your breath. There's oxygen advantage, which is probably or Buteyko breathing, which is the opposite of Wim Hof. It's really slow, really quiet, really gentle breathing. And there's a whole host of stuff in between. So it's like almost like having what do you call it? A pharmacy of things in front of you, or a toolbox in front of you, like what tool is right for this particular job. And that's how I try to teach people, give them a set of skills that they can take away. You got 30 seconds, or have you got 3 minutes, or have you got 30 minutes? Like, how long have you got?
Yeah. Is there a maximum time? Like, would you go, 3 hours of breath work isn't great?
Well, there's a couple of schools like holotropic breathing and rebirthing, which some of those can go on for like an hour and a half. And you're just doing it to music, and there's music in the background, you go. So I'm not sure there's a limit, but you need to have maybe a bit of experience. You need to have experienced people there. And so, yeah, I don't think there's a limit, but it can get quite intense and powerful and impactful. So
if anyone's listening and they're like, okay, this is piquing my interest. I'm stressed. I'm feeling burnt out. Maybe I've done that before. Maybe there's other things. Maybe there's other mental health conditions. Maybe there's other issues going on that they're just not coping well. And they go, you know what? I'm going to try this breath work. I'm going to put the hippie perspective away. I'm going to try it. Talk us through what it would look like if someone was coming in to see you and do a session in a group session, like a small group.
Yeah, I'd be asking them, why are you here? Like, well, how is it showing up in your life? Like, what's the situation for you? I want people to tell me what it's like. And then I tend to start quite light with people. I spend a fair bit of time working on their awareness of their breathing, simple things like breathing through their nose rather than their mouth. And we do some simple ideas. Awareness is a superpower, like just catching yourself, like emotions, right? Name it to tame it and all that stuff from the emotional intelligence world. But spotting how you're breathing is powerful, because if you can tap into that, and then we spend some time doing some simple skills, and then we slowly build. And then I slowly build on people. And what you're trying to show people is, when I talk about stress, you've kind of got 3 different moments of intervention. You can either deal with it before it comes. It's about to come. You're going to give a speech. You're going to go and do a presentation. You've got to go and present the numbers to the board. You're going to go in for a job interview, whatever it might be. So beforehand, what can you do to keep the stress levels under control? Or what can you do to lift yourself if you're feeling really flat? What do you do in the middle of it? So you're in the moment and it's getting stressful. Can you catch it? And what do you do in that moment if you catch it? And then afterwards, what do you do to let it to recover? You're going from one meeting to the next. You've just had a really powerful conversation with someone, a really impactful one. It's been draining, or you've just been on the end of something that you're going to bottle it up, but do you want to let it go? Or it's the end of the day, or it's the weekend, and it's been a hell of a week, or a hell of a day, or a hell of a month, or whatever it is. It's been busy season, and you're just sat there. It's like, what can you do? Because there's no one size fits all, and what's right for one person isn't right for someone else. Maybe if someone's burnt out and they kind of suffer from a bit panicky Wim Hof method, it might be way too much for them. It might be way too soon, because it can really send you over the edge if you're not used to it. But it's teaching people to slowly tap into themselves and learning how they're reacting to things and how they can get a bit of control back.
Do you have many guys that come into your sessions?
Yeah. Oh, there's lots. And the ice baths are quite popular with the guys. But also, yeah, I do. I do quite a few one-on-ones with guys. I think they just maybe prefer that rather than in a group. I'm in the period of trying to set something up for a group of local dads just to take them through a session. But trying to get dads together is like trying to herd cats. So that's a challenge in and of itself. But yeah, and that's my goal really, is to kind of, because that's how I discovered it. That's how I came across it. I want to do it in a group session. I want to do something for dads or for men, which is why I reached out to you in the first place. Yeah. And they tend to have a different attitude towards it. For them, it's just, they just feel a bit shit and they want to see what this is like. They've heard about it, or they want to try it, or they want to try something new. Yeah.
Why is working with men important to you? Like getting that dad's group or getting other men's groups together. Why is this an important work for you?
Because just from my own experience, I know how good we are at pushing things down. And I was lucky enough to find it early enough that I could deal with stuff on my own. And so whatever people will tell you, we're often told that, stiff upper lip, and cultures are different. I get that. But, it's that stiff upper lip, hold it down. We just deal with stuff. We don't really share. We certainly don't talk to our friends about this stuff, because everyone's got their own, and we just hold it all in. And for me, that space where you can get everyone together and that shared experience is something quite powerful. And that's what I want to try and share with people and give them that. Just see what it's like. It might not be for you, but just have a go at this and see. You might be skeptical like I was. You might really go for it, but just see, and you'll start to realize you're not alone. And that phrase, like I say, you have to do the work yourself, but you don't have to do it alone. And I think that sense of isolation, loneliness, being alone, dealing with stuff yourself is the problem, is why, without going too dark, is why men take their own lives more, because they get to a point where they can't deal with it and they think they're dealing with it themselves. And the only answer is to, I know that's quite stereotypical, and I know it's an overgeneralization, but I think, and men have the tendency to be more brutal, so they tend to be more successful with those attempts on their life, right? And so that's why I think, because I've got an uncle who took his own life, couldn't cope with the situation with a woman, so it's impacted our family. And again, people knew he was struggling, but didn't know that much, and that was his answer. And I'm not a therapist, I'm not a professional, I'm not a psychotherapist and stuff like that. But what I am saying is there are just ways that you can come together with people and release a little bit. And then, so that's why it speaks to me. That's why it's powerful.
It showed definitely for me at this men's retreat that I was at, last weekend, where 30 guys that don't know each other all rock up, not knowing what's going on. I knew because it was my second time. So I kind of had an idea what was about to happen. But the breath work, we did some, looking at our inner child, had a bit of fun. We actually brought joy in. And joy is something that's been really important for me as I've recovered from burnout, because when I burnt out, I lost all joy. I had no fun in my life. I couldn't see the brightness in anything. Everything was just dull. And so I'm actively now looking for things like joy. So having that at a men's retreat was really good. And it was just a great space where guys could come, they could express emotions, they could talk at a deeper level, not just, are you okay? How's it going? It's actually going down deep into some dark stuff, and then leave without any fear of judgment or other people's opinions, other people's advice. It was very much an open listening process, listening to ourselves, but listening to others as well. And there's power in that work for men. I think, I'm often asked, have I got men's programs for mindful men? And it's something that's on my horizon, not at the moment, because I know guys actually want this. They're rocking up to these men's retreats. I'm Googling more men's retreats. How can I keep doing my work and keep following my process? And I think guys actually do want this. They just struggle to either admit it or voice it and say, you know what, I think I do need something like that.
Well, I think, there's, and again, I'm no evolutionary expert and it's all quite overgeneralizing, but there's this deep kind of recognition that if you said to a group of men, let's go out this evening, let's set up a log fire, let's sit around and have a beer, they'd be like, I'm in. There's this idea of the hearth, this place where it's called the hearth, right? This place of coming together where the fire is, of coming together and being together. And very often in many cultures, not all, but in many cultures, men would go and sit together and the women would go and sit together and you would have that space. And now we don't, we just go off. We go off and do our stuff during the day, and you come home and that connection with groups of men only is different. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. There's a different energy when it's just men. Yeah,
you mentioned breath work as a way of being present in the moment. I find the same with sitting around a fire. Just watching the fire dance is something that is powerful in itself to help ground ourselves, to de-stress, to combat these signs of burnout, or the red flags, to put the red flags down and say, you know what, I'm just here. I don't have to be in the future or in the past in my head. I'm interested, coming from the corporate space as well, have you tried to infiltrate the corporate Australia with breath work as a way of supporting staff and their wellbeing? And how has that been received by different businesses?
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I've worked with a few so far. And you kind of need someone you need to have the right conversation with the right person. And I've been fortunate to meet a few of those who have been keen. Maybe they've heard of Wim Hof, or maybe they understand what breath work is. They've experienced it themselves in their life, and they know that the company needs it, but not everyone else knows what it is. And depending on who it is, I've done some sessions. So I did it, I've done a session for 54 Reasons, which is Australia's version of Save the Children. That the staff, they had their get together, and so I helped them close off their 2-day offsite, and that was really powerful. I've done some stuff for a company in aged care, because the carers are burning themselves out. Anyone that's caring for people in whatever mode that might be, nurses, dentists, doctors, vets, these people are really, they're giving so much to others that they tend not to give back to themselves. But again, it's trying to have the conversation that doesn't sound like it's too much about crystals and incense and robes, and more about, why don't we just have a session where I show you that in 2 minutes, you can just change how you feel. Doesn't get rid of it. I'm not want you to get rid of it, because the real power is tuning back into what is it that deep down that's causing this sense. But just in the moment, your emotion might not serve you when you want to break down, blow up, have that reaction. How can we just deal with it in the moment and then release it? Because that's the key. It's not the fact that you're going to experience the stress. It's how does it show up in your body, and how do you deal with it in the moment and in the long run.
It is such a powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've still got a long way to really embrace it. And I'm glad that people like yourself are out there doing that. I'd love to do a breathwork course in the future and make that part of my practice as well. So that's something I'm looking forward to as well. If someone's listening and they're not sure, but you're like, come in the door, what's something that you can encourage them with in terms of maybe expectations or feelings or anything like that? What's something that you can encourage them in to get them in the door and into one of your sessions?
Again, I think if I start talking about emotions, you switch people off. If I start talking about spirituality, you'll switch people off. But if I just say, look, we all know that there's times when you can just feel that you're about to react, and it's not going to help. And you never have this overblown reaction to something and look back on it and go, yeah, that was great. Eventually you go, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. That didn't help. Even if you might not say it out loud, you know it in yourself. Or you had to give that talk and you lost it. You lost your train of thought and you couldn't get it back, or you capitulated under pressure and it affected things. And you just, if I just had kept my cool. And why don't we just look at some skills for that? We're not all perfect. Everyone's got a limit. For some people, this will tip you over the edge, and others, it will take you to get to this point. But everyone's got a limit where you tip over the edge, whatever it is, whether it's tipping into panic, into fear, into anger, whatever. Why don't we just look at some stuff that might just help you the next time? And again, I use the analogy of the river in the moment, right? So your emotions are the same. Start as a small stream, and if you catch it early enough, it's okay. But eventually it tips into this bubbling thing, and then you just have to say whatever you want to say, and it sweeps you away. And then you look back and you go, oh my God, what happened? We see it in sport a lot. We see people get the red mist and it's, what is he doing? He's lost it, and it's that. Why don't we just try and give you some skills that might just help you the next time you're in that situation? You've got to go and present to the board. You've got to go and give that speech. You've got to have that conversation with the colleague. You've got to go and negotiate a pay rise. You got your annual review and you want to make sure that you're heard. And for women, you've got to have these conversations in work, and you want to make sure that people actually listen to you, and you want to make sure that you're coming across composed. I use the word composure all the time. Do you want to be the cool person in the room? Do you want to be the calm in the storm? Because I think that's quite appealing to a lot of people, because emotions are contagious. Well, you can tell when someone's not in a good place. You can feel it. So do you want to be the person that emanates calm and composure? And if so, we can work on that.
a great way to entice people through that door. It's just another tool in your toolkit that you can go to and get through your day or your week or whatever. And the more you practice it, obviously, the better you get at it as well. Definitely recommend not just running away after your first one like I was about to, and go back and try different practitioners as well, because what you get at one session might be different at the one down the road, and so forth, and just find what works for you.
Yeah, I think for me, that's true. I mean, for me, I think some people have come to do a session with me and they've had a lot of expectations that it's going to be the incense and the robes and the crystals and this amazing tripped out experience. And expectations are a funny thing, but I think for people that want that kind of experience, that's not what I do. It's not that I can't do it, but it's not what I do. It's not that I don't want to work with people in the way that they need, but that's not how I am. And so definitely, like you say, it's really important to find the right person that's going to create the right space for you and what you want out of the session. But, for me, people chasing highs and stuff, that's cool. If that's what you want to do, it's cool. But that's not, I like it when you have that experience. I want it to kind of emerge organically during the session, if that is where it takes you. But to kind of go in expecting it, trying to force it, that in and of itself is different. That's not what I do. I'm just there to help people tune back in and show them, some things. And like you said, the important thing is regularity. You don't go to the gym once and get fit. Right. And the reason people have personal trainers is not because you can't go on YouTube and find out how to exercise. It's good to have someone else there guiding you, watching you, making sure you're safe, making sure you're okay, and just taking you through a session. So you don't have to think about it as much and you can just go with it.
Definitely. Now, Thomas, if people are interested to learn more about your work and where they can find you, that is the question. I just said it in a sentence, but where can people find you?
Well, there's two places. I mean, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn for the professional work. So LinkedIn, you can just find me on there. It's Thomas Beresford. You'll see me on there. And then my website, Breath Space with Thomas. And there's all my social links are on there. You can kind of, you can talk to me there and, maybe set up a consultation, a quick chat. I always reply to messages. I always reply to emails. Have lots of consultations on there and just chats. And maybe I'm right for you. Maybe I'm not. Maybe you need it. Maybe you don't. Who knows? That's the two main avenues for me.
And that's great. And we'll put the links in the show notes so people can just easily access them. They don't have to hunt too far for them. But the last question I'll ask Thomas, and I ask this for every guest, is to plug something that's making you feel good at the moment. So we have talked about stress and burnout, and this can trigger some people. I used to get triggered a bit about burnout discussions. So I like to leave it on a lighter note, something that you're listening to, watching, consuming, something that maybe it's a self-care activity or a different style of breath work. What's something that's lighting you up at the moment?
Do you know what, right? I'm going to go something completely tangential, right? So we start to appreciate our time. So when we're parents, those moments, and I try to do so much work during stuff, and I'm looking at my LinkedIn and trying to reply to emails and develop my business, blah, blah. And every now and then I'll just let myself go down a rabbit hole, whatever it might be. I'll just click on some, see where YouTube takes me. And I love music. And I found, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I found this singer. And oh my God, you'll read the comments like, how have I never heard of this guy before? This guy called Dimash. And he is apparently, he's called the best vocalist in the world. And honestly, I've just never seen anything like it. It's unbelievable. Like, you just watch it, and even though I just like, how on earth do you sing like that? I've always thought of myself as a bit of a singer. I'm not. Me and my daughter sing, and she's 2, and I sound like a 2-year-old when I sing. But yeah, it's spectacular watching him sing. It really is. And then you read all the comments like, welcome to the rabbit hole, welcome to the world of Dimash, and you'll wonder why you've never discovered him before. And it's just something else. So yeah, he's got a song called SOS, and it's just something else to watch. Really, just unreal.
Wonderful. I'm going to find him and put it. Is it a guy, is it?
Yeah, so I can't remember how to spell his surname. It's Kidai Bergen, but his first name is Dimash, Dimash. And he's got this song called SOS. That's one of his most popular ones. And then I've watched the reaction videos, and people are like, oh my God. And some of them are really contrived, but some of them are like so genuine. And they're like, oh my God. So yeah, it's something else just to behold. Completely tangential, like I say.
Yeah, I'm going to try and find the link, and I'll put it in the show notes too for anyone's listening. I'm going to try and find the link. But Thomas, amazing chat, mate. Thanks so much for coming on. And I think we said this off air before we started recording. We were actually going to have this conversation about a year ago, but my mental health wasn't too great at the time. I'm in a much better space now, thanks to some breath works that I've done recently. But thank you for allowing me to have that space and coming back to me as well. You actually came back and said, I still want to have this chat. And I think it's a great chat because so many guys out there can benefit from even just looking at their stress, thinking about burnout, but also parenting and how that impacts. But maybe they're going to explore breath work after our amazing chat today. So thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. And thank you. And I think you're right. I go to quite a few events. I was at one last week and someone came up to me and said, I love your videos on LinkedIn. And I'm like, I can honestly, hand on heart, say it's at least the 5th time that's happened to me. And none of these people have ever engaged with my content, right? No likes, no comments, no nothing. They just consume. And the problem we've got with stress, the problem we've got with burnout is the stigma. And, fine, people don't want to consume. My point is, one of the things I like to do is try and destigmatize stress, because I wasn't stressed when the doctor told me I was. And he was like, no, you are stressed. Your body's telling me. Because we don't think we're stressed, but we are busy. We do have a lot of pressure. We do have a lot of responsibilities. Those are just other words for stress. The guy who came up with the term says it's probably not the best word for it. He meant strain, toil, load, overload. We relate to those words. And I think just that demystifying of the word is important, because people they know deep down that they might just be losing a bit of touch of themselves. And I'm not sure exactly how it showed up for you, but for me, it was that. So it's important.
It is. And Thomas, thanks again. Great chat. I really have appreciated it. Anyone who's out there listening and wants to get in touch with Thomas, check out his links in the show notes below. It's going to be amazing. Thomas, thanks so much and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much for bringing me on. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.